Working the night shift can feel like living in a different world. The streets are empty. The sky feels heavier, and every sound echoes louder than it should. For most people, late-night fast food runs are just a guilty pleasure. But for the employees who'd have to stand behind that counter when the clock strikes 3 a.m., the darkness doesn't just come from outside. Sometimes, it follows you home. Tonight's story takes us to a small-town fast food restaurant, a place where one worker thought he was alone until something made sure he'd never forget that night. The worker's name was Jason. He was 19, barely out of high school, and he'd taken the graveyard shift at a 24-hour fast food joint to save up for community college. Jason actually liked the late shift at first. No bosses breathing down his neck. No angry lunch rush, just him. The flickering neon lights outside, and the low buzz of the refrigerators keeping the soda cold. Most nights, the restaurant sat in silence. He'd clean the counters, mop the greasy floor, count the register, and wait for the sun to rise. The town was small. After midnight, the streets emptied. By 1 a.m., it felt like the whole world had gone to sleep, and Jason was the only person awake. Sometimes he'd stare out the big glass windows into the parking lot. The glow of the street lamps gave everything a pale, washed-out look, like the town itself had lost its color after dark. The quiet could be comforting, but it could also be unnerving. There's something about being alone in a place that is supposed to be full of people. The empty booths, the faint hum of the soda machine, the smell of fries that had been cooked hours ago. It all felt wrong, like the building itself was holding its breath. And Jason couldn't shake the feeling that every night, someone or something was watching him from the parking lot. It was a Wednesday night in early fall, the kind of night where the air feels sharp and every sound carries. Jason had just finished scrubbing down the fryer when he heard the crunch of tires rolling over gravel. He froze. At first, he thought maybe it was just a car passing by. But then, the sound stopped. A car had pulled into the drive-thru lane. Jason wiped his hands on his apron and grabbed the headset. Normally, customers pulled up with their headlights on, music playing, maybe laughter spilling out of the windows. This car, though, this car was different. Its headlights were off. No engine noise, no music, just a dark silhouette sitting under the drive-thru canopy. Jason pressed the button on his headset. His voice cracked slightly. "Welcome to Burger Shack. What can I get for you tonight?" Silence. He waited. The only sound was the faint buzz of the fluorescent light above the drive-thru menu board. He asked again. Nothing. Jason leaned closer to the window, squinting. The car was there. Bate couldn't make out who or what was inside. A full minute passed. Jason was about to break protocol and just close the headset when suddenly, a voice crackled through. Low, raspy, like someone who hadn't used their throat in years. "Hello?" Jason nearly dropped the headset. He forced a shaky laugh. "Welcome to Burger Shack. What can I get for you?" The voice didn't answer right away. Instead, it chuckled. Not a normal chuckle. Dry. Hollow. Like the sound of sandpaper scraping against wood. Then, the voice said, "I'm just enjoying the view." Jason's stomach dropped. He glanced toward the window again. He couldn't see inside the car, but every nerve in his body screamed at him that something wasn't right. He pulled the headset slightly away from his ear. His palms were slick with sweat. He turned, scanning the kitchen, the prep station, the mop bucket in the corner. Empty. Still, he felt eyes on him. Jason forced himself to act normal. Maybe it was just some drunk messing with him. That's what he told himself. But then, the car's headlights flickered on. Just for a second, and in that brief, blinding flash of white light, Jason saw the reflection in the drive-thru window. Not the car, not the menu board. Himself. And behind him, a figure, tall, dark, standing less than 2 feet away. Its outline blurred as if it didn't belong in this world. Jason gasped and spun around. The kitchen was empty. The fryer hummed. The soda machine gurgled. But there was no one there. When he turned back to the window, the headlights were off again. Jason's breathing was ragged now. He pressed the headset to his ear again, hoping the customer had just driven away. That's when he heard it. A whisper, right in his ear. "See you tomorrow." Jason ripped the headset off and stumbled backward, nearly slipping on the freshly mopped floor. He looked toward the window one last time. The car was gone. No sound of an engine leaving. No fading headlights. Just gone. The silence that followed was worse than the voice itself. Jason didn't tell his manager. He didn't call the cops. He didn't even tell his friends. Because, how do you explain something like that? All he knew was that when the clock struck 3 a.m., he never felt alone again. Maybe it was a cruel prank. Maybe Jason's mind was playing tricks on him in the dead of night. Or maybe something darker came looking for him that night and promised to return. He still doesn't know what he saw in that reflection. And maybe he doesn't want to. So the next time you pull up to a drive-thru at 3 a.m., ask yourself, are you the only one making the order? Or is someone else listening? 2. If you've ever had a night shift story of your own, share it in the comments. Because who knows, your story might be next. Hospitals are supposed to be places of healing, places of light, order, and safety. But once the sun goes down and the hole's empty, hospitals become something else entirely. A labyrinth of silence, shadow, and memories that refuse to rest. This is the story of one security guard who thought the east wing of an old hospital was empty. He was wrong. His name was Michael. Fresh out of the military, 25. Built strong but quiet. The kind of guy who could stand in a hallway for hours without flinching. He thought the night shift would be easy money. The hospital was huge, one of the oldest in the state. Parts of it were modern, gleaming, full of doctors and nurses. But Michael's assignment was different. He was tasked with patrolling the East Wing. The East Wing had been decommissioned nearly 20 years earlier. Patients had once filled its wards, surgeries performed in its operating rooms, families crying and praying in its halls. But now, it was dead space. No beds, no furniture, no staff, just an empty maze of peeling paint, broken tiles, and walls that seemed to breathe with the cold night air. Other guards told Michael not to think too much about it. You'll hear noises, they said. Pipes, vents, old wiring. Don't let it get to you. He laughed it off. He didn't believe in ghosts. But that was before he spent his first night truly alone in that wing. It was around 2 a.m. when Michael started his second round. His boots clicked against the linoleum floor, echoing so loudly it sounded like someone else was walking just a step behind him. The only lights came from the weak fluorescent bulbs scattered along the ceiling. Some flickered, some buzzed. Others were dead, leaving whole stretches of corridor in darkness. Michael carried a heavy-duty flashlight and a two-way radio. The radio buzzed with static now and then, but no one else ever called in from the East Wing. He almost welcomed the static hit, made him feel less alone. The East Wing had a smell to it, not the clean scent of antiseptic like the main building. Here, it smelled stale, like dust and mold mixed with something metallic. Something faintly like dried blood that had never fully washed away. He walked past empty patient rooms. Each one had a door hanging slightly open, as if waiting to invite him in. He didn't step inside. Not yet. The further he walked, the heavier the silence became. The hum of the hospital's central heating system was distant here. Every sound felt sharp, unnatural. That's when he heard it. A faint ringing sound. At first, Michael thought it was just in his head. A trick of silence, but then he stopped, and the sound continued. Ring, ring, ring. It was high-pitched, metallic, almost delicate, like a small bell. Michael frowned. There were no phones hooked up in this wing. No nurse stations, no active equipment. Everything had been stripped years ago. The sound was coming from down the hall, inside one of the patient rooms. He hesitated. Every instinct told him not to go inside, but his training told him otherwise. Investigate. Confirm. Report. He pushed the door slowly, the hinges groaning as if in protest. The room was pitch black. His flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing cracked walls, peeling wallpaper, and an empty floor coated in dust. But the sound continued. Ring, ring, ring. It was louder now. Michael scanned the room. Nothing. The place was barren. But when he turned off the beam of his flashlight and noticed the sound wasn't echoing. It was focused. It was coming from one spot. Michael stepped closer. His boots crunched on debris scattered across the floor. The sound of the bell grew sharper, frantic. He pressed his ear to the cold plaster, and that's when he felt it. The vibration. Not like pipes or wires. This was rhythmic, like a signal, like someone was ringing a bell on the other side. His blood ran cold. It would bike heart pounding, but curiosity pulled him forward again. He pressed his ear tighter against the wall. The bell grew louder. Ring faster now, like someone desperately trying to summon help. Michael's breath fogged in front of him. The temperature had dropped. He could feel the cold radiating off the wall. And then he saw it. Again wore right where his ear had been pressed. It looked like the impression of a face, not carved, not painted, an impression, as though someone on the other side had pressed themselves against the wall with such force. It left their features behind. Eyes, nose, mouth, and the mouth was wide open, a silent scream, forever trapped in plaster. Michael stumbled backward, his flashlight beam shaking wildly across the empty room. The bell kept ringing, shrill and desperate. His chest heaved as he pointed the light back at the wall. The outline was still there, but the eyes, they weren't just impressions anymore. They looked deeper. Hollow. As if the wall itself had grown sockets that stared straight into him. And then the ringing stopped. The silence was instant, suffocating. The coldness pressed against him from every side. Michael stood frozen, unable, too mobile. The only sound was his own ragged breathing and the faint, high-pitched ringing still echoing inside his skull. He turned and bolted. He didn't care about protocol, didn't care about finishing his patrol. He ran through the corridor, his boots slamming against the floor, his flashlight beam swinging wildly across doors and empty gurneys. Behind him, he thought he heard something, not the bell. Footsteps, slow, steady, following him down the hall. Michael never went back into that patient room. He finished his shift, pale and trembling, and the next night, he refused to patrol the East Wing. He told his supervisor the area was unsafe, that the floors might collapse, that the wiring was dangerous, but the truth was something else. He could still hear that bell in his head, and sometimes, late at night, he swore he could hear it again, faint and distant, calling him back. So the next time you find yourself in a hospital at night, walking down a quiet corridor, and you hear a sound that shouldn't be there, don't follow it. Don't investigate, because some calls are not meant to be answered. Have you ever heard something you can't explain? A sound that followed you long after it should have stopped? Share your story below. You might not be the only one. Gas stations are supposed to feel safe. A place of light in the middle of nowhere. A place to grab a snack, fill your tank and keep moving. But when you're the one working the night shift, those lights don't always feel protective. Sometimes they just make you a target. This is the story of one night clerk, and the customer who walked in with nothing but $1, and something far more disturbing. Her name was Sarah, 21, working nights at a gas station off a lonely stretch of highway, the kind of highway where cars passed maybe once an hour after midnight, their headlights cutting through the darkness before disappearing again into nothingness. The station itself was small, 2 pumps, a convenience store with buzzing neon signs, and the constant hum of refrigerators filled with energy drinks and beer. Most nights were the same. Sarah would sip stale coffee, listen to a podcast quietly on her phone, and try not to fall asleep behind the counter. She didn't mind the isolation. In some ways, she liked it. No boss, no customers to deal with, just the sound of the coolers, the flicker of the fluorescent lights, and the occasional moth slamming itself against the glass door. But sometimes, the quiet was too quiet. There's something about sitting alone under buzzing lights while the rest of the world sleeps. It makes you notice things. Every shadow, every creak, every movement outside the glass doors. And that's when you realize, out here, miles away from anyone else, if something happened, no one would hear you scream. It was just past midnight when the bell over the gas station door chimed. Sarah looked up. A man walked in. Tall, thin. His hair was greasy and unkempt. His beard long and tangled like it hadn't been washed in weeks. His clothes hung loose, as if they didn't quite fit. He walked slowly to the counter and just stood there. He didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't even blink at first, just stared. Sarah forced a polite smile. "Evening? Can I help you?" The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled dollar bill. He placed it carefully on the counter with one long finger. "I need gas," he said. His voice was flat, almost monotone. Sarah glanced at the dollar. "You'll need more than that. $1 won't get you very far." The man didn't respond. He just tapped the bill once with his finger. Then he lifted his gaze back to hers. There was something in his eyes, dark, sunken, hollow, like looking into a well that never ended. And then he started tapping. At first, Sarah thought he was just fidgeting, a nervous tick. But no. The tapping was deliberate, one finger against the counter. The sound echoed in the quiet gas station, louder than it should have been. Sarah cleared her throat. "Sir, if you want to buy something, you'll need more than $1. Do you have a card? Maybe?" The man didn't answer. Didn't even blink. Just kept tapping. The rhythm started to worm its way into her head. She could feel it in her chest, in her pulse. She shifted uncomfortably, forcing herself to look away. Maybe if she ignored him, he'd leave. She walked to the snack aisle, pretending to restock a shelf. But as she walked away from the counter, she realized something. The tapping hadn't stopped. It was behind her. Sarah spun around, heart pounding. The aisle behind her was empty. The counter was empty. The man was gone. Her breath caught in her throat. She hurried back to the register. The dollar bill was gone too. She told herself maybe he'd left quietly. Maybe she'd just been too distracted to notice the door chime. This time, it wasn't coming from the counter. It was coming from the far corner of the store, near the refrigerators. Sarah's flashlight beam shook as she aimed it toward the sound. Nothing but rows of soda bottles and bags of ice. She took a step closer. The air near the refrigerators felt colder than usual, like the chill was seeping out into the room. The sound came again. She flung the refrigerator door open. Nothing. Just rows of drinks staring back at her. Her skin prickled. Her instincts screamed at her to leave, but she couldn't abandon the store. Not yet. That's when she heard it again, directly behind her ear. Sarah spun, nearly dropping her flashlight. The aisle was empty. Her chest heaved, her hands shaking as she clutched the counter for balance. The gas station was silent now, except for the hum of the lights overhead. From the glass entrance itself, Sarah's heart nearly stopped. Slowly, she walked toward the glass doors. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and trembling, and then her reflection tapped the glass. Once, twice, 3 times. Sarah stumbled back, choking on a scream. She blinked, and in that split second, her reflection was normal again. Just her. The sound stopped. The silence returned. Sarah made it through the night. Somehow, the tapping didn't return after sunrise. but she swore she felt it echoing in her head, beating in her chest, a rhythm she couldn't escape. She quit her job a week later, but even now, sometimes, when the world is quiet, when the house is dark, she hears it again. Tap. 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 So if you ever stop at a lonely gas station in the middle of the night, and a man walks in with nothing but $1, ask yourself, is it really him you need to worry about, or is it the sound that follows when he leaves? Have you ever experienced something that stayed with you long after it was gone? Tell your story in the comment, because some things don't just visit. They linger. Empty buildings have a way of holding on to things. Footsteps, whispers, shadows that don't belong. For most people, a warehouse is just a place for storage. But for one night shift guard, it became something else, a hunting ground. This is the story of what he saw when he realized he wasn't the only one watching. His name was Daniel, 32 years old, working as a night security guard for an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The building was massive, rows upon rows of empty aisles, stacks of crates long since cleared out, and a ceiling so high that the moonlight poured in through broken skylights, like pale rivers. Daniel's job was simple. Patrol the perimeter, check the doors, make sure no one broke in. The warehouse was technically private property, and the owners didn't want squatters or vandals setting up camp. Most nights were silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that made every echo feel unnatural, every breath too loud. Daniel had worked plenty of quiet jobs before, but something about this warehouse felt off. The air was cold, stagnant, like the building itself hadn't breathed in years. And no matter where he stood, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was standing there, too just out of sight. It was just past 2 a.m. when Daniel turned down one of the longest aisles in the warehouse. His flashlight beam cut through the dust, illuminating cracked concrete and stacks of forgotten pallets. That's when he saw it. At the far end of the aisle, maybe 100 feet away, stood a figure. Tall, slender, perfectly still. At first, Daniel thought it was a trick of the shadows, maybe a coat rack left behind, or a post warped by the dim light. But then it shifted. Not much. Just the slightest tilt of the head, enough to confirm it was alive. Daniel froze. Froze! His instincts screamed at him to call for backup, but his hand hovered uselessly over his radio. He couldn't bring himself to look away. Daniel raised his flashlight higher, the beam trembling in his grip. The light washed over the figure, but it didn't reveal details. No face, no clothes, just a shadow shaped like a person, darker than the darkness around it. Smooth, fluid, across the aisle from one side to the other. The motion was unnatural, like it wasn't bound by gravity. Daniel's heart slammed in his chest. He stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. The radio crackled in his hand. He fumbled for it, whispering into the receiver. "This is Unit 3. I need backup in the East Wing. I've got..." Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. Espun Harun, scanning the aisles. He forced himself to breathe. Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe he'd imagined it. It was sharp, unnatural, like insect legs tapping against stone. Daniel's flashlight beam dotted around. The sound grew louder, closer. He bolted, sprinting down the aisle, his boots pounding the ground. He turned a corner and ducked behind a stack of crates, pressing himself against the wood. The clicking continued, slow, deliberate, moving closer. Daniel dared to peek over the edge of the crates. And there it was, the figure, back at the end of the aisle, exactly where it had been before. Watching him, Daniel's breath came in shallow bursts. His flashlight trembled in his hand as he raised it slowly above the crates. The figure didn't move, didn't blink. It just stood there, waiting. The clicking stopped. The silence was worse. The air felt thick, pressing against him from all sides. Daniel's legs screamed at him to run, but his body was locked in place. Every survival instinct battled the paralyzing terror in his chest. He swallowed hard, forced himself to step out from behind the crates. His voice cracked as he shouted into the dark. "Who's dead?" The sound echoed, bouncing through the warehouse. The figure didn't answer. It just tilted its head again. A slow, deliberate motion. Daniel's knees buckled. He stumbled backward, his radio falling to the ground with a clatter. That's when the figure began to move again. Gliding. Smooth. Closing the distance, inch by inch. Daniel turned and ran. He didn't stop until he burst out of the warehouse doors, the cold night air slamming against his face. He sprinted across the parking lot, not daring to look back until he reached his car. When he finally did, the warehouse stood silent. The broken windows reflected the moonlight, but Daniel knew it wasn't empty. He quit the next day, refused to step foot on the property again. And yet, sometimes, in the dead of night, when the world is quiet, he swears he still hears it. Maybe it was just a shadow. Maybe it was something else entirely. But one thing is certain, the warehouse isn't abandoned. It's waiting. And the next time someone steps inside, it'll be waiting for them too. If you've ever worked in an empty building overnight, you know the silence can be dangerous. Tell your story below. And remember, sometimes it's not the noise you should be afraid of. It's the quiet. It's the quiet.